Oh.
Bill Queasley, Jeff Johnson's lieutenant governor pick, Jeff, of course, is the Republican-endorsed candidate, gave an interview.
Argus is a Greek creature with 100 eyes.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know.
So that's why the newspaper is called the Argus.
Bill Queasley was interviewed by this paper, the Caledonia Argus, and gave the following quote on frack sand mining. Quote, "I have followed the issue a little bit in the papers," said Queasley, a farmer of 160 acres between Stewart and Rochester. Quote, "You can't be an expert on every issue, but I think you've got to look at all sides. This is a tough one."
Oh, really?
He then said, "I think the moratorium, give it 6 months or a year to study the issue, is a good thing. You need to determine..."
Wait, what?
I think the moratorium, give it 6 months or a year to study the issue, is a good thing. You need to determine what you hope to protect. Is it air pollution, trout streams, transportation? I think one of the big things is that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the DNR and all these groups, there needs to be some coordination between them. He said that the America has benefited from having the increased oil production that has taken place in western North Dakota. But there are but there are several things to consider with gaining our independence from foreign oil. We need to make sure it's being done right.
This is an awful lot of talking for admitting he doesn't know much about the issue.
You want the least amount of environmental damage possible.
Okay. So when we use silica sand for golf courses and for children's sandboxes, we're destroying the environment by getting that sand. But
he continued that consideration needs to be given to the roads and transporting the sands to the railways. He says you want that to be as close as possible. The roads are dangerous enough down here in this part of the state. You don't want to add to that. So that's what was said.
No sand is leaking out of the back of this truck getting on the road. But that's unfortunate.
Well, Kurt Zeller's campaign, Kurt, the former Speaker of the House,
right,
jumped on that and released a statement shortly after the story appeared, at least shortly after I saw the story appear on Twitter. The release says our next governor cannot continue to delay the economic benefits of responsible mining and sand fracking.
We're not fracking in this state. We're just providing sand.
I was surprised. This is a Zeller's statement. I was surprised to read today's article in the Caledonia Argus in which Jeff Johnson's lieutenant governor pick, Bill Queasley, voiced his support for a sand fracking moratorium. The Date administration has...
At least a continuation of a moratorium.
The Date administration has stood in the way of responsible mining for far too long. Our next governor cannot ignore or continue to delay the economic benefits of responsible mining and sand fracking. Putting a moratorium on sand fracking will cost hardworking Minnesotans thousands of jobs. Shots fired. When we return, Jeff Johnson's campaign responded to the Zeller's campaign to attempt to clarify Jeff Johnson's Lieutenant Governor Bill Queasley's comments he made that one could perceive to be anti-silica mining.
This is fascinating. Finally.
Indeed. Something's happened.
Excitement in the gubernatorial race.
Johnson's campaign responds when we return. 651-989-5855.
Up and at 'em.
That's rock. Welcome back to the show. I'm Jack Tomczak. That is Ben Cruzy.
Yes, this is rock.
We're talking about
It is a subset of rock.
If you'd like to hear a 21-year-old's impression and thoughts on what rock and or roll is, go to TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com and download the Post Show podcast the last couple days.
Sizzle doesn't believe Elvis or the Beatles are rock and roll.
You weren't here for the discussion this morning.
And people can tune in if they want to learn more about that to the Post Show podcast at TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com. We're talking about the Republican gubernatorial primary fight finally getting interesting. Bill Queasley, the former legislator and lieutenant governor picked for endorsed candidate Jeff Johnson, said to the Caledonia Argus regarding frack sand mining that I think the moratorium, give it 6 months or a year to study the issue, is a good thing. You need to determine what you hope to protect. Is it air pollution, trout streams, or transportation? and transportation. I think one of the big things is that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the DNR, all these groups, there needs to be some coordination between them. But there are several things to consider with gaining our independence from foreign oil. We need to make sure it's being done right. Agreed. You want the least amount of environmental damage as possible. So that is what he said.
Okay, that's an interesting take. In that, you know, I've learned enough about silica sand mining and fracking to know that we're not doing any fracking in this state.
Right.
That we are providing this substance to other states that wish to use it. Mm-hmm. But it's the same. It's the same stuff. Silica sand is the same stuff that you use in the sand traps at golf courses and in children's sandboxes. Sure. So if it's an environmental hazard to mine this stuff for fracking, why isn't an environmental hazard to use it for sandboxes and sand traps?
And not surprising, I agree with you. Kurt Zellers responded to this interview and said our next governor cannot continue to delay the economic benefits of responsible mining and sand fracking. I was surprised to read today's article in the Caledonia Argus in which Jeff Johnson's Lieutenant Governor pick Bill Queasley voiced his support for a sand fracking moratorium. The Dayton administration, this from Zellers again, has stood in the way of responsible mining for far too long. Our next governor cannot ignore or continue to delay the economic benefits of responsible mining and sand fracking. Putting a moratorium on sand fracking will cost hardworking Minnesotans thousands of jobs. Then the Jeff Johnson campaign responded to that, though they didn't name the Zellers campaign in their statement.
Okay.
It says, some campaigns are saying that Jeff Johnson wants to impose a statewide moratorium on mining for silica sand. That isn't true. When Bill Queasley visited Caledonia, he said that if local governments want to put a temporary moratorium on mining to study the environmental impact, that would be their prerogative. Neither Bill nor I, again, this is Jeff Johnson, believe that it is the role of the state to force any local government to change zoning regulations against its will or issue permits that its citizens oppose. The state government should encourage economic development, and in my administration, we will ensure that the environmental review process is done in a complete and expeditious way. If the mining can be done in a responsible manner, then the permits should be issued. Local governments can and do have a say in these matters, and a Johnson administration will not impose its will on local citizens making decisions as long as those decisions are legal under state law and the Minnesota Constitution. That's what all the campaigns have said. That's what the Lieutenant Governor candidate Bill Queasley has said.
Right.
That's where we are. Now, at least in the published portions of the interview in the Caledonia Argus, Bill Queasley does not say...
In the published bits, he does not say anything about the locality stuff, about local control.
Yeah, that the moratorium he would be in favor of is only on the local level.
I was going to ask about that, because that seems like the Johnson campaign is kind of pulling that out of nowhere.
However...
So I'm curious, as we know, when you talk to a reporter...
They get everything wrong.
They get a lot of stuff wrong. Yeah. They will leave out an essential portion of a quote or an entire. They will decide an entire conversation you had isn't relevant to the story. Mm-hmm. So unless we see this reporter's notes or listen to the tape, I agree with you. We do not know whether or what specifically Queasley was talking about.
Yes. Now, I did some research to try to get Mark Dayton's current view on
silica sand mining,
because as you know, the governor tends to waffle a bit and changes his mind with the changing of the wind.
There should really be a website that states where on the issue he is today.
Yes. And I found an article from myfoxtwincities.com.
Okay.
I ran this article past some people who were in the legislature the last couple of years, and I asked them, is this where Governor Dayton is right now?
Okay.
They said yes, as far as we know. Governor Mark Dayton says he does not support a statewide moratorium on silica sand mining for now, but he backs tougher regulations.
Okay.
Dayton told the Rochester Post-Bulletin, for a story published some time ago, that he wouldn't hesitate to call for a moratorium if the industry starts to spiral out of control. However, he also said he doesn't think that Minnesota has reached that point. The governor also praised officials in the southeastern city of St. Charles for their recent decision not to move ahead with a major silica sand project. And then they talk about what silica sand is. So I think neither Jeff Johnson and, frankly, Kurt Zellers didn't necessarily put his position in it. I don't know if he necessarily where he is. We can try to pick that apart. But I think both Dayton and Jeff Johnson
have the same position on
no statewide moratorium.
Okay.
And leave it up to the cities to decide this.
Okay.
Is that what you got from that?
It sounds right. That sounds like what they're both saying.
Yeah. Now, Mark Dayton is praising a locality for turning down a silica sand mining project.
Okay. Well, that's different.
I would think that Jeff Johnson, but I know him. I'm guessing I'm right.
Look, if you want to
Would
mine
not have
sand,
praised
mine
that
sand.
decision. Right.
So that's like pound sand?
Pound sand.
Hey, how about you go mine sand?
So there we are.
So something actually happened in the gubernatorial campaign.
That is as sexy as it gets at this point in the governor's race.
Well, maybe we do need to concentrate on the auditor's race.
Yeah, and
for our.
Here's what frustrates me: there's a difference between a statewide moratorium and local moratoriums.
Right.
And I wish the Caledonia Argus would have
specified,
and if Bill Queasley didn't say it, would have pressed him on it to find out. That is what I would have done, I think. Now,
you're asking a lot of the Argus.
From a political, well, they've got 100 eyes. From a political standpoint, I wouldn't want anybody on my ticket putting the words silica and moratorium together in an interview.
Right.
Because it leads to these kinds of problems.
Right.
And even if you are cool leaving it up to local localities to decide this stuff, I wouldn't have put it that way. And here's a question. We're all about local control as Republicans. What about the oh, there we go. Let's take it. Jeff Johnson. Jeff, what's on your mind?
How you doing?
Hey, we're doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, too. I was just listening and heard the conversation about silica mining.
Yeah.
So I just thought I would call in to let you know where I am, and I think you kind of have it figured out based upon what we put out yesterday.
Yeah.
I think in talking to Queasley, he was referring to a local moratorium because that's what's happening down there in Houston County, and so that was his interpretation of the question.
So when he said moratorium, because they have one down there, it was clear to the reporter that he was talking about a local moratorium.
That is certainly how he took it.
Okay.
This is one of the difficulties of every local paper being online nationwide is they may be writing the paper so thinking, only people from our town will read this.
Right.
Right. No, that's right. And you know what it actually brought up, though, for us yesterday, because I've had Queasley. Queasley has been a road warrior. I'm pretty sure he's put in more miles since the endorsement probably than all the other LG candidates put together.
Good.
And he's been great, and I trust him, and I almost always agree with him. I'm guessing there will be times where we disagree on something. I don't think this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'll probably come up, and that does not bother me in the least. Because
sure.
I think it's actually good if we surround ourselves with people that don't always agree with us.
I agree with that.
The fact that somebody jumped all over this thinking that we might have a difference of opinion, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Now, Jeff, question for you, because we on our side we stress that we believe in local control,
right?
And what your campaign is saying when it comes to silica mining, that if a local area wants to put a moratorium on it or prevent it in their town, they should get to do that.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
Now, here's my question. And this is where it might get a little sticky. What about something like Polymet?
What if the
local people are against something like that, something that could be a huge benefit to the state, and I know you support that.
Right.
You support Polymet. Is that type of are you okay with that type of local control too?
Well, I think that I think you probably can't have it both ways. You either support local control or you don't, and I suspect that there are going to be limits to, we don't let cities and counties do absolutely anything they want in the state. We can put some level of control, and that's always kind of the fine line that you have to draw. I mean, I have been supportive in the past of levy limits on local governments, for example. That's not local control, but I think there is a point where you look at what's in the interest of the whole state, and every once in a while you have to put some limits on that. So, if a locality up there, of St. Louis County, for example, said, we want 3 months or 6 months to look at this more. They're not going to, I can guarantee you that.
Well, right.
But, that's probably the same concept. If they said, we're going to ban this from ever happening, that's probably a different question.
Yeah, and luckily, and you mentioned this, for Polymet and mining up there, the local people,
they want
it more than anybody else does.
Yeah.
Desperately, they want it.
Yeah.
And we were actually I took a little tour of the range this week. We were up there for a couple days, and my point to them was, I hope everybody's honest about this. If Mark Dayton is reelected, Polymet is not going to happen.
Yeah.
He can say he's undecided at this point, but I think it's pretty clear who has the control in the DFL party right now, and it's not the private unions; it's the environmentalists.
That's right.
And, he's putting this off because I think we know what the answer is going to be if he's reelected.
All right. I agree with you. Thank you very much, Jeff Johnson, for calling in to clarify that. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Good morning.
And the environmentalist led in the DFL that is now led by the environmentalist. It is led by Mark Dayton's ex-wife, her group Conservation Minnesota, that has stated they don't want mining in northern Minnesota, and that's who funds everything on their side.
Is this how this morning show works now?
What's that?
So if we just mention a gubernatorial candidate, we can summon them.
That's right. Usually we have 3 times. You say it 3 times.
It's like Beetlejuice.
And they're summoned.
It's weird. Hey, let's talk about Jeff Johnson. And then he calls.
That's right. That's how it
cool.
happens.
That's cool.
Stephanie Kluver. I will summon her when we come back, because this is a serious public affairs show.
It's serious business, Jack.
Ben's internet girlfriend. 6'5".